British Airways says it's still working round the clock to reunite passengers with their luggage. A bank holiday weekend that will be remembered for a chaotic scenes of stranded travellers, parked planes and lost suitcases. 75,000 people were affected by the problems caused, it's said, by a massive IT failure. The airline says it's now operating a full flight schedule, but what lingers is the question of why things went so badly wrong and what happens to all those people whose bank holiday plans were ruined. Well, first, let's look at actually what did go wrong. Our technology correspondent Tom Cheshire is in central London. He's been looking into the causes behind the meltdown. What have you discovered, Tom?
Well, it's a bit murky, to be honest. British Airways told us it was a power supply issue at one of our UK data centres. An exceptional power surge caused physical damage to our infrastructure, and as a result, many of our hugely complex operational IT systems failed. Now, the confusing thing about that is SSE and UK Power Networks, which both serve the area around BA's headquarters just by Heathrow, they said there wasn't a surge at that time. So that means it might have been a different data centre, in which case it's hard to see why it would have been so catastrophic if it wasn't the main one. Or it might have been within the data centre itself, which would again point to some sort of mismanagement. But then, even if you have a power surge, we've been speaking to experts today, it shouldn't take a whole data centre offline. This is what one expert told us earlier.
Ordinarily, data centres, don't have issues like that. It sounds to me like there's something more involved here. To have such a prolonged outage is unusual. Ordinarily, the worst case scenario is that people go to backups. They recover those backups quite quickly.
So that's what's slightly unconvincing about this. Also, British Airways would have been prepared for this. If you look through their 2016 annual report, risks to the business, critical IT failure is one of those risks highlighted in the report. And they say to mitigate that risk, they had system controls and disaster recovery plans. Well, obviously, those don't seem to have worked. It doesn't seem to have had that much of an effect, though. After losing around £500 million off its share price earlier today in early trading, it recovered to just 1% down. So investors don't seem to be too upset just yet. Passengers, though, still waiting for their bags. More than 750,000 of them won't see things quite so suddenly.
Tom, thanks a lot. Murky indeed. Well, BA, as Tom was saying, they're part of International Airlines Group. Shares did start trading today. 4% down early on. That was about £500 million off. But as you can see there, they finished 1.4% down, which is nasty but not catastrophic. What then, though, is the long-term damage to the reputation of Britain's best-known airline? Well, Paul Charles is the founder and chief executive of the PC Agency, travel public relations company, also former head of comms at Virgin Atlantic and at Eurostar. Paul, you've seen a few disasters over the years, but how does this one rate?
Pretty high up in a top 10 list of things that can go wrong for an airline, that's for sure. I think the response is what has staggered so many people. The speed of response or lack of it. When there is a crisis like this at an airline, a train company, wherever it might be, you are judged on how quickly you respond as a leader of that business. And it took 7 hours for Alex Cruz, the CEO of BA, to record a video message that was then put out on their own Twitter channel. Why so long? That's a very long time. Best practice says really you should be out there 2 to 3 hours after an incident begins with a clear explanation, full of clarity, on exactly what happened. I don't think that clarity was given fast enough, which is why BA ended up in more of a mess on Saturday.
Interesting. You said Alex Cruz there, who's the boss of BA. Lots of people think it's Willie Walsh, who's the boss of IAG. Where's Willie?
Well, Willie is a good question. He hasn't been seen, but obviously he's running several airlines, not just British Airways, overall as under the umbrella of IAG. So he's letting his CEO of the airline do what's best to fix the problem. Now, arguably, that's the right thing to do, but I suspect Willie Walsh is also standing by to make sure things don't get worse should he need to step in if they do.
Yeah, we're seeing there, Paul, these long lines of miserable passengers. We're hearing stories of people whose honeymoons have been ruined, who've picked up flights to get home and now aren't getting reimbursed. I mean, this does look like a kind of analogue, old-fashioned response, doesn't it? And we're in a digital world.
Absolutely right. BA is one of the world's oldest airlines, yet its crisis manual was either ignored or just was out of date. We're not quite sure. But it doesn't seem to have acted as fleet of foot or as flexibly or as quickly and transparently as it should have done. I think most airlines would have responded that way. So it now poses the question as to what Alex Cruz will do to make changes for the future, because you can't just leave this situation as it is. He's got to reunite 75,000 people potentially with their bags. That needs to be done as quickly as possible. Then he's got to start a new process. Backup IT systems, they need 2 backups as a minimum, not just one. And then they need to look at their communications processes and make sure that if they are in this situation again, that they can respond far more quickly and far more transparently than they did at the weekend.
What's the bigger problem for BA? Is it those images of people who've lost their suitcases and are queuing up, or is it the fact that they've had some weird IT failing that looks a fairly fundamental issue?
I think it's all of that, plus the incidents before, which have been major incidents. The opening of T5 is one of them, this latest one at the weekend. These incidents are giant because BA is a giant of an airline. So when something goes badly wrong, it goes really wrong on a global scale and affects airports and passengers all over the world. That's why it creates so much interest. The problem is each of these incidents is chipping away at the brand. So the brand erosion mounts up, and over time that will have a major impact on the valuation of the brand by the city and the perception of the brand by us as consumers.
And in a nutshell, Paul, Alex Cruz's job, is it under threat?
At the moment, he'll stay where he is, but he needs to come out urgently and say what he's doing to fix the problem, and he needs to say when he's reunited everybody with their bags. That's what affects most of us in the short term. We want our bags back.